one of the things that he spoke to several of our hearts very, very strongly was that he was going to restore the dignity in these people that he would bring.
Welcome to the Dinner Church podcast. Dinner churches are affordable, they are simple, they are very effective at evangelism, and they are rapidly increasing across the country and across all denominational lines and across all social locations, large city, rural, in between. I am Verlin Fosner. I am the director of the Dinner Church Collective, but I'm also a pastor of a historic church, a 100-year-old church in Seattle, Washington. And 20 years ago, our church went into an unexplainable decline. Much frustration. That soon led to much prayer. And we really felt the Lord direct us to begin to experiment with this ancient form of church, the table church, if you will. At this point, we have 14 dinner churches, and we're opening new ones all the time. In this season of the podcast, I am going to be reuniting with leaders that we've had a chance to train, and I think you're going to find it very inspiring. If you're interested in learning more, please visit dinnerchurch.com. And if you're interested in learning a lot more, once you get to that site, toggle through to the Dinner Church School of Leadership, which is our graduate course, and it is the deepest dive into the history and the theology of the Dinner Church. And now, this week's interview. Hello, this is Verlin Fosner with the Dinner Church Collective. I am very pleased today to be able to have Sandy Johnson, who is an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God and is pastoring a dinner church in Ocean Shores, Washington. Welcome, Sandy.
Well, good morning, Verlin. Thank you so much. It's my honor to chat with you.
Well, I've been looking forward to this. In fact, I was having a conversation with my superintendent, our superintendent, because we are both in the same denominational stripe. And we were talking about you and how it is the Lord is using you over there. And he said to me, have you put her on your podcast yet? And I said, well, no, I've been thinking about it. He goes, I think you need to do her next. And I think you need to send me the first copy of it, because I absolutely want to share her story across the 346 churches that make up the Northwest Ministry Network, mostly in the state of Washington and northern Idaho. So this is how it is you came to be here, and this invite now, as opposed to maybe what would have been, a couple of months down the road. But I am really glad to have this moment with you. Let me just start. How did you first become interested in Dinner Church?
Well, Gary and I were heavily involved in ministry in a traditional church, and God began talking to us about having something different for us, challenging us to pull away and spend some time on our face before Him. And so as hard as that was, that's what we did. And after a couple of months of seeking and listening, God wanted to do some work in us before He would do the work through us. And so
such good language.
Yeah. And so we spent that time allowing Him to do what He needed to do. And then He began to talk to us about Dinner Church. We have friends who were doing one in another community. And so we knew about it, but we didn't really know what it was. We didn't know the details. But when God began to show us that that's what He had for us, we just started reading everything we could get our hands on, mostly penned by you, and YouTube. And then we started signing up for your training classes and visiting dinner churches, just trying to really hear from God and really see what it was He was calling us to. And that happened during COVID. So,
It was the COVID that provided the opportunity, the ground cover for you to stay at home, so to speak, and do this.
Yeah.
So backing up just a little bit, we'll go forward and talk about the training you received in a second. But you had a sense from the Lord that you were going to need to really change up the ministry form and the ministry function that you were operating in first.
Yes.
It was like a spiritual stirring, right?
Yes.
Wow. Talk more about that. What was that like to have the Lord kind of pluck up the nest of what you had been doing without you having any definition of what was going to replace it?
Well, honestly, when what's stirring in your heart and doesn't match where the church you're planning that is going, then you need to look at you, right?
Well,
And so we began to realize there was some diverging going on there. And okay, God, what is it? What are you trying to show us? And I mean, just that time of life where everywhere you turn, it's that message from the same message from God. Everything you read, everything you hear. And he even gave me a dream. And I don't usually remember details of dreams. I remember every detail of that dream. I can still feel the feelings that I had, where he showed me that there was an opportunity coming that I couldn't say yes to unless I obeyed him. And so that's what did it for me was, okay.
Really got you looking for a forthcoming intersection.
Yes.
In your spirit. Yes. Your spirit was aware of something that your mind didn't have definition for yet.
Exactly.
Wow. So when did it first trigger in you that this might be dinner church?
Oh, gosh. It was probably about 3 months after that. We initially obeyed. God said, you have to take this step of obedience before I'll show you what's next. And that's always fun. And so it was about 3 months later that it just stuff about dinner church just kept popping up. And I just remember sitting on the couch and, we knew God wasn't done. We knew he had something, but it was just that, we don't like to be unproductive. We don't like to be sitting, And so I picked up one of your articles about dinner church and how it meets so many of the needs. And I just remember the tears started to fall. And I just said, God, I feel like I was born to do this. Gary and I don't have a background in church. We weren't raised in church. And so we get it. We became Christians as adults. And so we've been there, done that with a lot of the stuff that we're facing. And so it's just, that's kind of a natural fit for us. And he had previous professional culinary training. So he's our chef. So, you can look back and see all the ways God all along was preparing us for this.
Yeah, my goodness. So the tears started to roll, and then finally your mind began to catch up on the idea that maybe this is that intersection.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. So now let's talk about the training. You read some articles, you read some books, you jumped on some videos, YouTube, started looking around. What else did you do to really prepare yourself skill set wise for this leadership task?
Well, your trainings were very, very, very helpful. We went through the 2 of your 3 that you offer throughout the year. And
the encounter and the launch.
Yes, those were very helpful. Visiting other dinner churches was helpful because what worked for their community, not all of that necessarily works for ours, but we got to see, the overall running of a dinner church. But then we got to step back and say, okay, this is our community. What's the fit for our people?
So did you notice a pretty drastic difference from dinner church to dinner church that you visited?
Pretty much, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Which gave you permission to do the contextual work in Ocean Shores.
Exactly. And, as the pastor, it's my responsibility to know the people and to know what they need, to know how to reach them. Obviously with the Holy Spirit's help, but it's been one of the things that God told us in the beginning. And see, that's the thing, is way back, that question you asked about how we got started. God gave us everything we would need right then. And he continues to give us what we need as we walk. But he told us who we would bring, what he would do in their lives. He told us what challenges we would face, and said we would always face opposition. And he has helped us walk through that. But one of the things that he spoke to several of our hearts very, very strongly was that he was going to restore the dignity in these people that he would bring as being created in God's image. And so we have everywhere from homeless up to, wealthy retirees to working families to single moms to grandpas and everything.
Wow.
And so we have also everything from a truly secular-minded person to a strong Christian. And all age groups. I think our youngest is 5 and our oldest is 95. So
a 95-year-old comes into your dinner rooms each week. That's beautiful.
Yes.
So the same thing happened to Paul, where the Lord began to speak stuff into his heart, giving him some vision about stuff that was a long ways from reality. And you had a sense of vision that came out of your prayer lives well in advance of what you've actually experienced.
And can I tell you that? Can I tell you that on the third dinner, he showed it to me. We had a couple come through who are still coming and still very dear to my heart, and obviously struggling with addiction. And she came through the line. God just showed me the shame that she was wearing, and she wouldn't make eye contact. She was in the food line and she was looking down and she wouldn't make eye contact. And she looked like she was ready to be told she couldn't be there. And my heart just broke. I had to fight back the tears. And so I just kind of bent down and got in her eye line and introduced myself and told her how happy I was that she was there. And, we're so honored to have you with us. And her back straight, her head came up, and I saw dignity. I saw shame fall off, and not that that's she's still working that process, but in an instant, I just went, wow, God, you just did it right before my eyes. So
that is something.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about how the isolated population is the first ones that Jesus pursued and would walk by a lot of others en route to the isolated. But we don't really, and then of course that's what flooded into those early tables, and we're watching that again. Those are the same kinds of people which you're describing. But really talking about the dignity aspect, I have never done that. I mean, I guess it's like isolated people really do feel unworthy, and they feel like they're not at all living their best. But just, I love your wording about the restoring of dignity, that vision that the Lord gave you. That is really important. Do you mind if I steal that language in my training?
It's all yours.
Wow. Well, man, you've really put an edge on that isolated understanding with those words. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Restoring dignity. Man, oh man. So back to your training, though. What else did you do in the area of training? As far I know, you did the encounter and you did the launch. You also jumped into some of the Dinner Church School of Leadership, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you audited a number of those classes.
Yeah.
So your schedule didn't line up to ever be live in the class,
right,
but you watched all of the videos afterwards. I don't know if I've ever asked anyone this question. Did that help you to watch a video that wasn't live? 35 times over a 9-month period?
It did. It was sometimes frustrating that I couldn't interact.
Right.
But yeah, it was very helpful. It was a deeper dive into my then understanding of Dinner Church. It really helped solidify that it's a church, and not everybody that we encounter believes that, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is
Right.
what God's doing in people's lives.
Uh-huh. And if Jesus did it and treated it as a church, we're probably okay to enjoy it and not feel like we have to convince everybody else all the time.
Right.
That's his problem,
Right.
not our problem.
Right.
Oh, wow. Well, I am glad to hear that. I have been concerned at times that because I know that there are some people schedule wise, they just can't do the Tuesday nights, but to opt to just be a reflection of the videos that are sent each week. That's your option of being a student in that program. I'm glad that you found it helpful, and I certainly want to offer that to all of the listeners. That even if for some reason Tuesday nights 4:00 Pacific time doesn't work, there is always the opportunity for you still to be involved at the time you can get to it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that witness and for that testimony.
You're welcome.
What did you do right in planting your dinner church in Ocean Shores?
We obeyed. We did it God's way. I look at the way he led us, the way he brought it together, the way he's still opening doors and providing. Each step of the way, it's just been about obedience. Just, doing what he said to do, when he said to do it, the way he said to do it, and believing that vision, whether you see it or not, believing that it's true and it's coming to pass. And I think that's the biggest thing we did right, and we still strive to do. We were so dependent because God told us, this is what I want you to do, but we didn't know the how, the where, the who, where the money was going to come from. We didn't know all that much about dinner church and how this would all work out, but we just said yes. Okay, God, we know none of these details, but yes. And that's what it starts with, is just yes. He put it all together and provided in such a way that there was no doubt that it was him. So when the opposition comes and the hard times come and the disappointments or discouragements come, that's what we have, is there's no doubt this was him. So he's going to continue to do it. And that was very valuable for us and our team.
Sandy, it's obvious that you are a very spiritually sensitive and discerning person. Everything that I've been listening to you is the Lord giving you vision up front, extending a strong spiritual hand. And for you, it has just felt like, grabbing him by the hand. And then as he leads you, take a step, and he leads you, take a step. And suddenly here you are in this tremendously effective dinner church congregation. But you were led there. There are individuals that will be listening that are an awful lot. They're not wired with a sensitive heart like you have.
Okay.
They are very methodical. They need to have sort of like all the flight plan filed in advance in triplicate. And their mind needs to really understand steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, And so your counsel to them, the one thing that you did right is something associated with listen with your heart. The Lord will talk about this. And but that's something that's easy for you that might not be easy for others. Is there any spiritual counsel that you would give to someone to help them sensitize themselves more to that daily leading of the Lord?
Well, first of all, I would say he's not going to lead you the way he led me. Each of us is different, like you said, and he created you, so he knows how to lead you. He knows how to communicate with you. This whole dinner church thing was his idea, and your specific community dinner church is his idea. And so it's not that I would just encourage people not to feel like they have to figure that out or do something different or be something different. Just the way he created you, he's going to do it. And so just that whole how to sensitize your heart, really being in his word solely for the objective of hearing from him. on a daily basis. That was huge for us. I can be in the Word to prepare for a message, or like tomorrow night, we have a Bible study in our home that has come out of the dinner church. And so, I can be preparing for that. But if I'm not just preparing to just sit and listen, that's really, if we don't do that, we're missing the most important part.
Yeah. I was studying in John 15 about hearing the words of Jesus is what leads us to great fruitfulness.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of other things that lead us to fruitfulness, but there is that great fruitfulness layer. And I'm really hearing this from you. That's why I'm just feeling to burrow in and breathe some courage into all of our podcast listeners that it is okay to follow Jesus a step at a time into this fog bank, and something really beautiful is going to emerge somehow.
Yeah.
So thank you for speaking that courage. Very, 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 very appreciated. What is one thing you wish you'd have done different in your dinner church plant?
That's the one question that I knew you were going to ask. I kind of wasn't sure how to answer. I guess there's none of it I wish I'd done differently. It's all just been learning. I would say, in the beginning, we kind of were a little more conservative with the advertising than maybe we should have been. And so we ended up ordering signs that weren't big enough or, didn't really work right for the area. And so then we had to go order different signs. And to me, that's all just attached to, laser focus on your vision. What did God say he was going to do? That's your guiding point on things. But don't be afraid to try things. And if they don't work, it's really not a failure. It's a learning. Because like I said earlier, it's my responsibility to know my people. And how am I going to know them if I'm not working at that? And part of that is trial and error. You learn as you go. So. Yeah.
And that is actually the world of church planting in its basic form anyway. It is a little bit like, it doesn't matter what form of church planting that you're doing. It's a little bit like throwing all the pieces of the jet off a cliff, diving off with it, getting it all assembled before it hits the bottom and then takes flight. There is a little, it does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And even more so when we're talking a version of church that's 1,700 years old. It's not something that's just a pure innovation that we can just kind of monkey with as much as there's not a lot of visual patterns around us to give us a thoroughgoing amount of evidence like there is for the traditional teaching-based church. We've got hundreds of thousands of those examples around us, but not so much of the dinner church. So definitely it takes some courage to throw the pieces off and go, here we go.
Yep.
Here we go. Yeah. Well, I am so thankful that you have done it, and I appreciate the boldness that you have exercised. Tell me a particular compelling transformation story.
I just one, huh? Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh,
tough to choose.
Boy. Well, I told you the one with the lady that came through and watching, and we've really been watching her and her boyfriend's lives being transformed to the point where they're actually planning to get married.
Wow.
And so, they're special. Just the 95-year-old man that comes and the kids that are there, he never gets to see his grandkids or great grandkids, but he feels like he's with family when he's at the dinner church. There's Jeremy that came in, had just been released from prison and was dealing with a deep depression. And he came in early and sat down and picked up one of the Jesus Story Bibles. And this has got to be one of my favorites because it didn't have anything to do with me. But he sat down and he just was thumbing through it. And then all of a sudden he froze on one page and he's just got really, really into what he was reading. You could tell it was really impacting him. And so I had gone over and introduced myself, brought him a cup of coffee and sat down and chatted with him for a few minutes. And he was telling me about his struggles with just being out of prison and all of that. And so during dinner, he told us that he had come in battling with a really deep depression. And as soon as he started reading the Jesus Story Bible, it lifted.
Really?
Yeah. That was, that's what I mean by God is doing this in a way we can't ever think it was us.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that.
Oh,
yeah.
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, the presence of Jesus that is present, we understand.
Yeah.
Most others that come in without a faith background, they don't. They feel something though.
Yeah.
Like him, and suddenly he feels the depression go, or other people have felt their desire for drugs just go, felt sickness just leave their body. You're coming into a very pure, thick presence of Jesus when you're at a Jesus table,
and you don't understand that. You don't understand that until you experience it.
And all that darkness and all that stuff just can't handle the light of Jesus, so it separates from him. And wow, that is amazing.
And I'll add, if I may, in the 2.5 years we've been doing this, we've had 3 salvations and 7 recommitments. One of the groups that God told us that he would bring was the people that have been hurt by the church and walked away from the Lord.
Oh, yeah.
And so
interesting.
We see a lot of that. We see a lot of people that have picked different religions and kind of mixed them together for the belief system. Yeah. We see a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Universalist stuff. Yeah. So de-churched people coming back and suddenly saying, well, I can do this.
Yeah.
It was the other maybe thing that they couldn't. Wow. Well, Sandy, the denomination that you are in, of which I know so well because I'm in it as well, is really struggling to place ordained women in pastoral roles. It's not that they don't want to. I know there are other denominational groups out there that have a theological barrier associated with ever letting a woman have any degree of teaching headship over a man. And our denomination does not have that at all. In fact, we've got a number of ordained women like yourself. But our polity is such that pastors are selected by congregations, and our congregations all around the land just keep putting men back in place. They're not for all of the denominational leaders' efforts to try to help them see the opportunities of women pastors. The congregations just keep picking men, and it's become really a painful thing because a lot of women have felt very, very called to be a pastoral leader, and yet our positions are never really made available for that, except for staff positions and things of that nature. And here you are, you were in a certain spot that jumping out into a dinner church leadership is the way that you really begin to move into this. And have you found it to be a meaningful option? I mean, the last thing that I want is to be suggesting, well, hey, if you can't get a job in a traditional church, why don't you come at least get one in a dinner church? Because that's not what I believe is going on at all.
No.
But I'm just curious about the satisfaction, the meaningful, the ministerial meaning aspect of you leading this church as an ordained woman.
Oh, it's huge. It's very meaningful. And you're right. I didn't jump into it because it was the only avenue. But it is a meaningful, powerful avenue. If you are someone who's feeling the tug in this direction, there is a freedom that comes with pastoring a dinner church because you are free to let go of all the traditional ways of doing things, that all the traditional expectations that are on you, and you can minister to your people in a way that directly impacts them every time you're around them. And I see, Gary and I have been in church ministry of some sort or another in the almost 40 years we've been married. And I have never seen the Holy Spirit work like I've seen him work in our dinner church in the last 2.5 years. There is an openness that comes from people who have their guard up when they come in and sit down and eat with you. When they are told they don't have to sit through the Jesus story if they don't want to. Most of them do, and the ones that don't start staying after a while. But then to hear a short message that's just telling a Jesus story and telling how it relates to our lives today, and then praying, they are hungry for that. And so, all these things that seem like make it not real church actually make it more church than I've ever seen. What church should be, which is to say not one version over the other, but to say seeing the Holy Spirit change lives.
Yeah. My wife, Melody, has surmised over the years that, and here I'm going to get into some, gender typecasting, and I know that I'm right on the devil's edge here with this whole conversation, because there are some that just have such deep emotion about this topic. But she has wondered, why are we not having a flood of female pastors coming to lead dinner churches, for the very reason that women tend to have higher nurturing capacity than men. And there's something about a dinner church that naturally, and because of the table, because of the hostessing, that just naturally pairs with that nurturing skill set, that nurturing language, that ability to just instantly cause strangers to feel like they're being completely welcomed into this family, this table family. And it's just something that women tend to get more instinctively than men, even though there's plenty to the contrary on both sides and skill sets. But there's still a generality to it. Have you noticed something down that nurturing road that you feel like there's a real advantage for you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just natural for me to love these people. And they know that, they feel it, they take it in, and just the comments that we get about what it's like for people to come there. And I do think that, like I said before, God took both Gary's and my lives and our experiences and all of our knowledge and was preparing us for this. So I think that I was knit together in such a way to do this. And that doesn't mean that a man couldn't do it well. But I think from what I've seen, in my humble opinion, one of the big reasons why I see women aren't really drawn to dinner church is that whole idea that it's not a real church, that it's just an outreach. And so it somehow seems like second best when, if we can be willing to not preach for 35 minutes, but preach for 7 or 8 minutes. And I know it's to me, I've had a few comments over these last couple of years about it's gospel light. And it's not. It's every bit as deep into how much more deep in the gospel can you get than Jesus?
Right.
And I'm thinking, I don't know how you would come up with that, but it's tradition. It's just a long time way of thinking that because it's not in a church building and discipleship doesn't happen in a classroom, that somehow it's not a real church. And let me tell you, I've been in discipleship classes, like I said, for 40 years. And I have not seen the regular growth that I've seen in the dinner church. I think about Eugene Peterson's book that he took off of that famous quote about a long obedience in one direction. It's that verse that says, "Follow me as I follow Christ." It's that simple. It's your training. I use it. I stole yours. It's simple. It's not simplistic. It's simple, but it's not simplistic.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is really beautiful. I remember that very famous Korean pastor, Younghae Cho, when he felt the Lord speak to his heart that they needed to open up a whole lot of house churches. But he said, "But who's going to lead them? The men don't want to." and so the day that the Lord spoke to him and said, "You need the women to lead these." And how many, I think he has 750, or had at that time, 750 women pastors that were pastoring all the house churches. And then they all came together at the big assembly on the weekends. But I as the movement leader, if you will, of Dinner Church Nation across the nation, I see hundreds and hundreds of opportunities for Dinner Church, and buildings that are saying, "Boy, we'd sure like to have one of those dinner things in our building," and neighborhoods where people are saying, "Wow, sure like to have this community dinner with Jesus stories in my neighborhood." I mean, there's way more opportunities than we have leaders right now. I mean, by the droves. It's the constant problem, and I'm just wondering if the Lord isn't speaking something to all of our hearts, similar to what He did back, in Korea all those years ago in Seoul. About, man, we've got to have a revival of women pastors stepping up and saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna step into that one. I'm gonna step into this one. I'm gonna step into this one." It's definitely a very real pot on the stove that's beginning to bubble. But it needs to bubble in real time in the hearts and the minds of many of our women pastors across the land. So if you're listening and that's you, boy, take my words and ask, "Lord, are you involved in this?" I mean, take Sandy's words and are you speaking to me about this? Because there is a huge need. So, Sandy, thank you very, very much for revealing your perspective on that part. Well, just the last question before I hang up here. What is one piece of advice that you would offer to leaders who are in the process of planting a dinner church or planning a dinner church right now?
Again, just one. But,
a favorite one.
I would say keep a laser focus on the vision that God gives you. Really believe that and make your decisions out of that, not what you see today.
Wow.
One of the things that God did differently in setting us up, even as a dinner church, we're different. God told us we would face a very huge wall of mistrust, and so we were not to be connected to a church in the same town, that we needed to be planted by a church outside of Ocean Shores. And so that's what we did. We contacted Myron Ness out in Grayland, and he's been incredible. I mean, he took that brave step of saying yes, and he's been such a great help and mentor to us. And it was definitely what God wanted. And I still have people regularly come to me and say, what church here in Ocean Shores is doing this? And I say, we're not connected to any church in town. And they say, good, because I wouldn't be back if you were. And
my goodness.
We've had quite, that 3 salvations and 7 recommitments is in that environment. So that might not sound like a lot, but in that environment, that's a miracle. So,
there was some significant mistrust that was built up. And Ocean Shores is only, 3,500 people?
It's about
something
8,000.
like that?
Yeah.
Oh, 8,000 isn't that large? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's definitely feels small enough. Like what happens in one corner is immediately known in the other.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I'm surprised there's 8,000 people there. It seems so much smaller than that. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for allowing the Lord to give you a vision a few mile markers down the road from reality. And you offer a long yes, long enough for you to actually get there to where it became what was actually happening with your ministry and with your dinner church. And I'm very thankful you gave your time and your insight and your heart today. Blessings on you and Gary for what you're doing.
Thank you, Verlin, for making this possible for us.
We've been talking with Sandy Johnson and her husband Gary, and what a great story and a great Jesus table and Jesus stories coming down onto that table that this actually is, and we're so thankful. Thanks again, Sandy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast has been brought to you by Fresh Expressions and the Dinner Church Collective. If you want to learn more about the Dinner Church Collective, please go to dinnerchurch.com. And if you want to learn more about our graduate program, Dinner Church School of Leadership, Fresh Expressions is a worldwide movement that is doing church for people who don't do church in a contextual way that genuinely matters for them. The Dinner Church Collective is one of those streams that is in the middle of this worldwide movement, and it's a great honor to be a part. I am Verlin Fosner, your host. The editor of this podcast is Joel Limbowen, and the producers are Kathleen Blackley and Chris Morton. Senior director is Dr. Chris Backert. Please help us spread the word if you would. Give a review on Apple Music or Spotify, and please share this episode with other friends that might be interested, and blessings upon your work for the gospel.